Hi, this is Cecilia Lynch from Focused Momentum. I'm the Chief Strategist and author of an upcoming book, The Hidden Strategist. Today on the show, we're going to talk about strategic thinking and how to find the hidden strategist in your organization to help your planning.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Today, we're going to be taking an insider look at why strategic thinking is so challenging for most leadership teams. Remember, you can chat about this show or any of our past episodes in our Facebook page by simply going to Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips inside of Facebook. So just get yourself over there and chat about this show. If you're a new listener, a new viewer for the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. Remember, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, though, so please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Georgia to Colorado. Also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, you can listen to us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the sales C-suite, sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that leadership requires strategy. But how do you know if you or a team member is a relationship leader, a visionary leader, or a strategic thinker? Well, let me ask you, how are you going to be able to tap into the strategic thinking that remains dormant inside of your organization? Well, stay tuned, because our guest today on this episode is Cecilia Lynch. Now, Cecilia Lynch is a seasoned strategist. She's the author and a leading authority on strategic thinking, recognized for her strategic mind while she was in her 20s. Cecilia started her executive career leading a strategic planning for a company that was doing $1 billion globally as a brand. In January of this year, her company, Focused Momentum, the strategic consulting firm, celebrated its 20th year. Cecilia's latest book, The Hidden Strategist, discusses the great need for executive teams to have a strategic thinking and how they can continue to how they just keep overlooking the best strategists in the organization, which are very often women. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Cecilia Lynch. Welcome. Good to have you here. I've slugged my way through the intro, but I'm glad you're with us.
That's a lot to say, yeah.
It is. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, in many ways, strategic thinking has become this sort of catchphrase.
Yeah.
Help us get clear, first of all, as simple as you can, what's the best definition of strategic thinking? Because it's a word that everybody's throwing around.
Yeah. So a lot of times I think people think that strategic thinking is just fast thinking, and it's really not. Strategic thinking is really when you start at the end and work your way back.
Oh.
So most business leaders, most people in business or even in nonprofits spend an incredible amount of their time in what I call the transactional mindset, where they are dealing with issues and problems daily to keep moving forward in an incremental way.
Mm-hmm.
But strategic thinking is really about the opposite of that. It's about thinking, where do we ultimately want to go? What's our ultimate destination? And based on where we are, what are the right alternatives to get there? And when you shift to a strategic thinking mindset from kind of that problem solving, incremental planning mindset, you see the alternatives differently. So one may get you a step forward, but is that really the right step for you, or is it going to start to move you off into a tangent? So that's kind of the biggest difference, is that strategic thinking is really about thinking about the end first, and not what you need to do to solve a problem today.
So really thinking with the end in mind first, and then chunking back into what it is that we need to do. And that's a way for us to stop going off course as we move forward.
Or spending a ton of time debating on which of the next incremental steps is the right one, when it's really clear that one of them is a better decision than the other.
Why is strategic thinking so challenging for most leadership teams?
Good question. I think it's because it's not a muscle we use a lot on a daily basis. So when I work with leadership teams, they're stretched, they're exhausted. They often are very quiet when they've been pretty active, and they're very, very engaged. They get set back a little bit, and it's a muscle we don't use. I mean, we spend so much of our day kind of thinking about, okay, what do we need to do? We think we have this game plan to like be productive and get those things off our list. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, I need you to help me with this. And there's a problem that you have to solve. And so those are the muscles we use on a daily basis. We're very focused on problem solving as a culture, I think. And we're very focused on, being helpful and, resolving issues for ourselves and for others. And as leaders, we're often thought the role that we think we're supposed to play is the person that answers questions, provides direction. And that's a muscle that people are really used to using. And so strategic thinking is kind of the opposite of that. It's the person who says, and asks a question, and puts the thinking in gear versus the decision making in gear. And so it's just a muscle we don't use every day. And so it takes either discipline or processes to pull away from that and actually engage in strategic thinking.
So like you said, it's a muscle we don't use.
Right.
And definitely agree that I think that most leaders will talk about how so much of their time is taken up by putting out fires in some way, shape, or form, or as you said, answering, being the person with all the answers. But those things can feel like demands. They're happening all the time, right? So do we need to be more disciplined about actually blocking time for strategic thinking? Because it seems like, like I said, all those things are pulling at us constantly. There's this fire going on. I need an answer. Maybe for many leaders, you said they're exhausted. Maybe they just don't feel like they even have time for that.
Yeah. It's like anything else. It's if you make time for it, then it happens. And I encourage my leaders to adopt a weekly practice of strategic thinking. But that's just for them personally, so that they feel clear about what they need to do, confident and productive. But that's what we do with our teams, or our leadership teams. It doesn't have to be every day. A team is mostly geared towards implementing their goals and commitments.
Right.
That's what you're asking them to do with their planning and their budgeting process and allocating resources. So it doesn't have to be a regular thing for an organization every day, every week. It shouldn't be, because it can actually be destructive in a way, right? So years ago, there were a lot of organizations that spent a ton of time in brainstorming and doing ideation sessions all the time. And it was very disruptive for people who were there, who I call the brilliant tacticians, who were just trying to get things done.
Right.
So strategic planning you should at least open up the broad solution space once a year for your whole company. But I think there is a challenge in being on top of the dynamic environment that we operate in today, and only having maybe an annual strategic planning process. Where we find clients really need some assistance is understanding how to examine what we call emerging issues and translate those into whether you should tweak or modify your objectives and your plans. And that's really a very hard dance that leaders have to go through. It really depends on, what's going on in their market and their industry.
Of course.
If they're in a high-paced environment, then they need to do that on a more frequent basis than annually, but they need to protect the operational kind of aspects of efficiency and productivity as well. So
absolutely,
every organization I've consulted with is slightly different, given kind of their organizational development, their challenges, and their market dynamic. But at least annually, you have to set aside time. And if you haven't done it in a while, you need to step back and kind of do it broadly. And it may take more than a day or two of you guys getting together and thinking about it, but absolutely at least annually.
So how can we really tap into the great strategic thinking that might be unrecognized or untapped inside of our organizations? Because my guess is there's a lot of that, right? My guess is there's a lot of people who are very skilled and we don't even know they're there.
Yeah, so I was doing some research maybe in the last 2 years, and I was shocked to see that 8% of the executives evaluate themselves as being effective at leading strategy development.
Right.
So 8% say that they feel confident engaging in strategic planning for their organization. Yet, when I go meet with clients and I ask them what they've done, like when they call me, they're usually asking for an additional capability. And so when I ask them, what have you done before? That those executives get together to plan. And 8% of them are confident in doing that. So, that's one of the reasons why they call people like me, but they also don't open up the solution space to involve other people. We do large creative strategy sessions. I think the largest one we've done is about 60 people, but if you have an executive team of like 10 or 15 people or 8 people or 5 people, you need a lot more intellectual energy than that to kind of create new thinking. And we look for what we call the hidden strategists in organizations to participate, to come in the room, to be at the table, to engage in strategic thinking to benefit their company. And that is usually a pretty unusual thing. That in itself, to bring in people who are not in the executive team to strategic planning, makes some people feel uncomfortable.
Well, let's dive into that for a minute, because that is the title of your book, The Hidden Strategist.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by the hidden? They hiding out in the closet? What is the...
Kind of, yeah. Sometimes they are. So hidden really is, they're not in senior leadership positions typically. They don't aspire to have those kinds of roles. They're really passionate about the business and about acting on the business, and they see executive leadership roles as being too far removed often. So when you circle the wagons and bring just your executives into a planning session, you miss them. And they're hidden from you. So that's one of the reasons I call them the hidden strategists. The other reason is they tend to be people who aren't advocating for a very strong point of view. They're usually the people who are asking questions, going back to why, strategic thinking is different than problem solving. They're not advocating for you to side with their decision, or get you aligned with them. They're more the person who asks the question and is generally very curious. They also are people who are incredible students of their market. One of the CEOs of one of our larger companies used to say, you all must be students of the market. And he was basically saying, you all really need to understand and be engaged in this business. And I've always been shocked by how many people are working in an enterprise and know very little about the business itself.
Tell me what you mean by that, because I think that's going to be a fascinating point for somebody listening or watching us.
Oh my God, I have the best story.
Yeah, please.
Years ago, when I worked for Levi Strauss, I was, this is before I became the finance and planning director of Dockers, but we were working, God, our, iconic company, great company. I was working as a business analyst. I was helping the merchants in the organization understand kind of their financial statements and understand what kind of decisions those indicated. And so, or what kind of reality was going on in their business. And I had a peer who was not as strong on the business end, and it pulled me aside. This is like, she'd been there for 15 years. I'd been there for like 18 months. She finally pulled me aside and she asked me, what is the difference between a knit and a woven?
15.
And I was like, what? And she said, we were garment makers. We made clothes. And she did not know the difference between a woven shirt, which for everyone, that's what you're wearing, and a knit shirt. I'm wearing a sweater, it's knit. She did not know, nor did she ever think to ask in the 20 years that she's been there, what is the difference between those two things? And I was blown away. And that to me was a wake-up call. Like, just because you get a paycheck and you've spent, in her case, 20 years, and who knows, she probably was there for another 20, doesn't mean you actually are interested in or know anything about the business. You do a job that's this big and you get paid for it. Sadly, there's a lot of people like that in companies, but you as a business leader know those people that are beyond that. They are the people, I mean, that's how I got pulled out of obscurity into a strategy position at 29. Because the president of the Dockers brand knew that I knew the business, because I was out there talking to everybody in the company every day about what they were doing and how, the decisions that were being made in their business were affecting their financials. And so he plucked me out of obscurity because I was someone who knew the business. And I guarantee you that everybody on an executive team knows 10 people in their company that are not in executive positions who know the business, who have a very good sense of the industry, the customers, the product, who are deeper in the organization, so hidden from large kind of planning processes. And those are the people that we pull into strategy conversations. And they often our clients are surprised that we want those people. But they don't care about like a hierarchy. They're not gunning for somebody's job. They literally want to participate in strategy and thinking to benefit the company, and they are often not involved.
But don't you think, particularly in the hierarchy, people are very protective of that hierarchy, and so the idea of a company having a C-suite team, and then saying, okay, well, we need to pull Jennifer in off the reception desk, and we need to pull Paul in, who works in delivery or works in the warehouse. You want to do what?
Yes, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, but that I mean, I can see where you're coming from entirely. However, the reality of, I'm just thinking about the reality of somebody watching us, listening to us, and going forward, maybe they're in the C-suite and saying we need to bring those people in because of the protectiveness of the hierarchy. I imagine they're going to bang up against a lot of resistance on that.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate and not very smart. So that's a male-oriented view, because women, I grew up where women were threatened by me, quite honestly. When I came up, I got hazed by more women than I did men. I've seen that shift dramatically in the last 20 years. And I've seen it shift for men as well. I think that paradigm that you need, that if you invite others into the creative process, you're somehow indicating that you're weak or you should be replaced is foolish. And
Absolutely.
it's, so a long time ago, I worked with this really smart man who said, if you want to know who the leader is, look for the person who holds the door open for the last person that leaves the room. And that may not be the leader de facto, it's the manifest leader. And that is what we aspire to now, and what we've gotten a lot smarter about as companies, I think. So I think that there's less threat to bring more people into the process. I think there's a lack of awareness that it's a tactic you can use. Mm-hmm. And there's a lack of awareness as to how to facilitate those conversations when you do that, because you're not indicating you're promoting anyone. You're just inviting them into a thinking process.
Yeah.
So it has to be contextualized. It has to be kind of, handled appropriately. And there's a lot of thinking that needs to be done after the creation of the process, which you can then use those people to help do the work, quite honestly, while you go back and lead. But it's unfortunate that there is that lack of understanding as to how to do it. When that happens, there's usually very little resistance. They just have never thought about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you brought up something, let's go to that, which is that the research shows that often women don't rise through the ranks because they haven't seen themselves particularly as strategic thinkers. Is it women that are undermining themselves, or are they overlooked, or are they set up to fail, or is it, are they in their own way? What is it?
Right. It's probably a lot. I don't want to talk for all women. I'll tell you the stories that I know from my own experience and from the research that I'm doing for the book. So, the whole lean in thing, that infuriated a lot of us, including me. So women I think are more comfortable with making different choices for themselves. And so at times where, we make choices to have kids and make sure we can be there to pick them up after school, or not travel so much, or take care of our parents, or things like that. We look at our life demands as a whole, and our job is actually just one slice of it. So in a lot of organizations, there was incredibly talented women who are not in C-suite level roles, because they look at their job as one aspect of their life.
As opposed to the life.
And the identity. They don't get their identity as much from it, quite honestly.
No. Yeah.
So I think that has a lot more to do with it than why, I think that's why they're hidden, because they've gotten comfortable with not being so visible, and they have a tremendous amount of value to add. I would say in the 20 years that I've been doing this work, the amount of hidden strategists that are not women is by far the majority. We find
not women.
That are not women. So the hidden strategists that are men are the minority.
So there's women away.
Hidden strategists are women.
Right.
And they're usually women who've been around the company for a while, who've had multiple roles in the company and see things from a lot of different angles. And they have confidence in the leadership where they would have left, but they just don't get tapped. They don't get tapped because, they're not in that executive suite, and they, and then we bring them in and they start talking, and people just look at them like, oh my God. And then they drive the strategy. And then they go back to their job afterwards. And I know, and they know, a huge percentage of it is their thinking.
So how so you've brought up the dilemma here, which is an important one that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the context of hidden, which is that these, we'll say women, these women, they're not aspiring for their identity in the corporate environment. They're not aspiring to be in the C-suite, but they do know the industry. They've been passionate about the industry. They probably know more than most people do about it. but they're okay with a back seat.
Yeah.
So it's
potentially.
Yeah, well, potentially. I'm not saying that's always the case, but I'm just thinking of a particular situation. So that person's kind of okay with the back seat. If you brought them in to do some strategy stuff, they'd have fabulous input. But as the leader, whether that leader is a woman or a man, how do we even know that person exists? That's my point, because they're hidden from us, which says, I don't even know who they are. How do I find them?
Yeah, they're not as hidden. Okay, so first of all, you have to know to look for them, and then you'll see them. So it's that person that when you do some rollout, some communication in the company of like the next year's goals and objectives, right? They're the person who always asks that question. Mm-hmm. And you always go, okay, I know you're going to ask a question. Or they jokingly say, well, we need to be prepared for Sarah because she's going to ask a question. They know who they are. They just don't think of them as strategists.
So what do they think of them as negative Nellies?
No, they usually think of them as line managers. They're usually not negative Nellies. They're usually people who are high performers, but in a limited scope.
Right.
And they are known to be strong thinkers. They are usually very good at delivering consistently. And they participate in conversations around the business incredibly easily. Mm-hmm. But you never ask them to come into your strategic planning. So they're only hidden as a strategist. They're definitely huge allies in the company. You depend on them. But you don't look at them as your strategist, partly because you think you're supposed to know that. And if again, it's this insecurity that happens in executives when they don't know how to lead strategy discussions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I'm just thinking about the viewer, the listeners saying, okay, if these people are hidden, how do I recognize them? Because they're
ask
not
questions. They listen to other people's responses. They know a tremendous amount about the industry. They're not on the executive board, and they're usually women.
That's fascinating. Eh?
Yeah,
that's really fascinating. If you were going to sort of say to a leader watching, listening to us, to go out and sort of point out or recognize a hidden strategist, you said these 3 points that you just gave us. How do you approach that person? Because like you said, their identity is not involved in trying to jump to the C-suite. So how do you invite them? How do you and bring them in?
Right. So the same way we do it, we do a interview process when we take when we're starting a consulting engagement, and we're in this first phase. And we conduct a strategic assessment interview, and we engage people in some basic strategy questions. It's always the executive level, and then we ask them, who else should we talk to? And so they always know that there's somebody who we should talk to.
Is that right?
Oh, they always do. They're like, you should really talk to so-and-so, and you should really talk to so-and-so. And when we talk to that next level down, or even the level below that, they know those people know the industry. They know those people have something to say. And when we interview them, we hear that their response, it's so funny, Dov. It's like, so we ask a basic question like, what are the trends and realities impacting that could impact strategic thinking? And some people say, our performance is down. They give really lagging indicators, right? Things that are very widely known. The strategist will start talking, and out of a 60-minute interview, I have to stop them after 15 minutes so we can actually talk about something else. They are so ripe to be plucked from that perspective. And that's how you know, because they have an endless amount of information and perspective And that's when I come back and I was like, okay, well, there's our strategist. There's our hidden strategist.
Right.
And luck, sometimes we'll have a couple. Or when I ask the question about, if describe what success looks like. If give me the picture of what you understand success to be. And they say, well, we don't really have a clear vision, but my vision is, and they just hold forth. Those are the people who are great at managing kind of functional areas will say, well, our vision is, and they'll literally grab a piece of paper and read it from some document that has been generated. Mm-hmm. Those are great line managers. They're just not great strategists. They're not the people. So those are those people that are flexing those big problem solving, incremental thinking muscles 99, 100% of the time. And the thinker has the ability to use other muscles.
Right.
And the interview process is what does that. So, we really encourage people to take a different approach to their strategic assessment. Often they look at what I call lagging indicators, which is how well did we do against last year's objectives. Right. And they don't do anything that involves any external engagement, like what's going on in the world around you. What are the market forces that are at play? What are the trends and realities that you think are going to impact your business that you don't hear anybody talking about? Mm. Those are how those people have a ton to tell you.
Right.
That's who they are. So you have to ask. You have to do some research on your own, which is what we always do. But I think you don't have to hire a consultant to do that.
Well, you talked about how there was a boss who saw something in you. Do you think that you were quite naturally always a strategic thinker?
Yeah, I came out that way. Yeah, I definitely did. I think my first word was why.
Right.
My son's first word was cake.
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 Oh, look, he said cake.
I know. No, I do think that there are people who are just born strategists. Certainly I was a born strategist. I have friends I just have a friend that came back over from France during the holidays, and she was laughing that I'm the same person, that I was, 30 years ago. I was like, of course. I think there are people who are born strategists. I think there are people who kind of are always wondering what the bigger thing is. What's the end game here? However, I don't think it's something that I think it can be taught. I think that's what I wrote my first book on, was giving people the basic models to think more broadly about things. But I do think that a lot of the hidden strategists in organizations that you want to tap are the natural strategists. They're always going to do what they're doing wherever they are. They're big problem solvers in their families. They're the big, volunteer, kind of leaders in their church or in their community and stuff like that. They tend to lean into those bigger areas, and they have a lot to offer. I think that, doing executive, it's such a fallacy that, being on the C-level is a glamorous role. It's so not glamorous.
Nope.
It's so much hard work. And I think those strategists know that. And they're like, okay, I don't really need to do that.
Not really interested in that. So you said you've always been like that. So this is one of my favorite questions, which is, how do you think your because this is full Monty, we like to get a bit underneath here. How do you think your childhood set you up to be that, to think in that way?
Well, I'm sure that some of it has to do with my heritage. I'm Irish, and we've survived a lot in this, like a lot of other peasant cultures, but we've survived a lot, and I think those of us that are left have to be kind of smart. I also grew up in a house with a father who was an alcoholic, and I was the youngest of 6 kids, and I had to know within a heartbeat what was going on, and so I have like a sixth sense around the environment, and I pick up on things and integrate them. But I think the greatest gift is that I'm dyslexic. And so I see patterns everywhere. I can't spell really well. I work on it every day. I'm never gonna, be a speed reader, but I see patterns very rapidly, and I think that's I know it's been a huge benefit to me. So that's what I mean. I came out that way because my brain is wired a little bit differently than, somebody else who, can read 4 books in a day.
Yeah, I can relate in ways that we can have a whole conversation about in a very large way. But yeah, I mean, I think that hypervigilance, which is what you're talking about, is a curse and a blessing. I mean, it can be overwhelming very quickly, but in our careers, it can be an enormous gift because as you said, we're seeing patterns that other people just don't see, they miss. But when you grow up in an environment that's not particularly safe, you are looking for the safety, and in looking for that safety, you develop the hypervigilance that has you notice things that don't match the pattern or that are in line with the pattern. And the reason I'm asking you is because, I'm wondering how many people are listening to this who, because I'm looking at the original questions I was asking you were about being a leader looking for the hidden strategist. But now I want to flip that a moment and just say, well, maybe you, the listener, are a hidden strategist. Maybe you're not in the C-suite. And I want you to be able to recognize yourself and go, oh yeah, shit. Yeah. I mean, maybe I do have some value in it that I could add, and I don't want the role, but I do want to give input because it's valuable.
Yeah. And those people, when we touch them, we're encouraging them to engage in the process. And I've had a couple of instances where even somebody wasn't selected to be interviewed, but because I needed to get some information about something, I got introduced to them. And they're brilliant, and I said, you should, I would love it if you participated in this process, and they back away and they're shy and think that it's not what they should be doing. And that's really a disservice to the organization themselves, because they're working there and they could have a much more productive experience. But there are tons of hidden strategists that are sidelining themselves.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to get to here is wonder how many, because we can blame the ego of the person in the C-suite. We can blame their insecurities. We can bring all those things to the front. But I wonder how many people are highly valuable strategic thinkers who are not stepping up at themselves.
Yep. And all they have to do is ask for a meeting. I mean, all they have to do is say, can I talk to you for a few minutes? That's how I got recognized.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get recognized as that? Because that wasn't your role initially, right?
Oh gosh, no. No.
So tell us how you got recognized. What was the turning point for you?
So there was so I was very, I was one of those people that was doing my job. I was running I had 15 meetings a month with the core part of the business people, running through the business financials and talking about kind of what I will call lagging indicators and exploring with them, do you need to change how you're making decisions? So I was already kind of showing my strategist, because instead of just saying, here's your financials, I was saying, so this could mean this. Is that what it means? So I was doing that questioning thing.
Right.
So I worked with all of the divisions at Levi's, and a position came up for finance and planning for the Dockers brand, which is the head financial person inside the business. So there's only, at that time, there were only a handful of those. And it was kind of the position that everybody who was working in the accounting field kind of got to eventually in their career. And I was 29. And so that position was open. I got cornered in an elevator by a president of a division and a senior merchant of another division. And this man, Tom Caston, who's the president of the women's wear division, turned to me and said, you need to apply for that job. And I said, what? And then the merchant in the rooms, in the elevator with us said, yeah, you need to do that job. That would be great. And I was like, what? And of course, my boss was going for that job.
Your boss was going for it.
Yeah, and she was a very good friend of mine. But when a division president says, you should apply for that job, I did. And of course, because I didn't think I was going to get the job, because it was, you know, my boss's job to get, and other people who had been there for 15 years. And again, I'd only been there for like 18 months. You know, I went into the interview completely myself. I was relaxed. And, you know, we went through the interview process, and at the end of the interview, the head of the division turned to me and said, do you have any more questions? And I said, yeah, so why aren't we using some of our finishing plants why aren't we selling some of our, or, you know, we're not at full capacity. Why aren't we actually white selling some of that to Calvin Klein? I mean, they're, you know, the DNR says, which is the trades. So in 2 seconds, I asked some business question, and it indicated to him, indicated to him that I was a student of the market. This is funny because I hadn't thought about this yet. And when he answered my question, I listened really intensely, and I said, okay, I get it. All right. Well, that's it. I don't have any more questions. Thanks. And I left the room, and he hired me. He was like, fabulous. Nobody in that role has any sense of the business. Nobody's actually, I want someone who's more than a numbers person. I want someone to drive our, you know, our planning process, our future planning process. And so I got the job.
Fabulous.
Yeah. It was
fabulous. That's so cool.
Yeah. Those two men were awesome. Tom Kasten and Bob Siegel. They were great leaders, really great leaders. They looked for talent everywhere. So they did what I think every other leader should do. They're constantly looking for who are those hidden talent that I haven't tapped into. Yeah, they were great.
That's so. It's interesting because, you know, you're talking about women being these hidden strategists, not totally, but dominantly. And yet, you know, you're talking about two men who were able to see that. You know, we've had this discussion on other shows where I've interviewed women. I'm a big supporter of women and equality and all these kinds of things. But oftentimes in the conversation, it comes back to women not supporting women fully to step into those roles. And it does fall on men for numbers reasons too, because there's just simply more men in the roles.
Where we are.
But yeah, exactly. So how can, you know, the women listening here, how can they support themselves and each other women better in stepping into those roles?
They can recognize their peers who are the hidden strategists. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends of mine have said to me, you know, you're just it. You're brilliant. You're that thing, right? And these are moments where I don't feel that way. These are moments where I'm struggling because God knows in 20 years of business, not all that's glorious. And they're the ones who kind of tap me and give me strength. So, you know, women need to find their peer groups, and they need to find those people who are supportive of them, and they have to listen to them. When they tell them to step up and try something new, try it. Right. Nothing to lose. Nothing. No. So there's a lot of, I think that dynamic that I experienced when I was 29 and became an executive with other people who were 15 or more years older than I was, I got hazed like you can't believe. More by—
I said that in the beginning. Tell us what you mean by that.
I had women who were at senior levels who were threatened by me. They thought that I had somehow gotten there because of, I don't know, I'd slept with someone or, you know, made some commitment, or it was dating, which we didn't allow any dating in the company at that time. There was this, nobody could date anybody in the company. So there was nothing like, and I, you know, that was never my thing. I was like, no. I mean, I was so far from that. I was such an innocent in that regard. And they just couldn't believe that I had a different way of doing things that maybe stood out. And, you know, I think that that's gone. I hope that that's gone. I mean, I see women being competitive with other women, rarely these days. It's much more about bringing mentoring and bringing people along. And I would say that's also true with men. I mean, I see women mentoring young men or more junior, maybe the same age, but more junior. I mean, I do think mentoring, which was kind of nascent when I was coming up, is much more evolved now. And it's something that people not only do HR departments need to create programs to encourage it. Those people in positions where they can provide mentorship get so much out of it that they seek it out. They're looking to mentor because they get so much from it.
But at the same time, there's a lot of fear around it now due to sexual tensions, all the potential threats. Because oftentimes, in fairness, I'm fully supportive of the Me Too movement, supportive of women speaking out. But at the same time, I'm also aware of men being nervous because their word is not enough anymore. And I'm not saying it should be, but what I'm saying is that if somebody's word is more valuable than another person's word, then we don't have an equal. So I interviewed a couple of military guys who wrote a wonderful book called Athena Rising, which was about men mentoring women, and how we need to step into that. But how many men are very nervous about that? And that was before the Me Too movement blew up. Yeah. I mean, so there's, I think it's, for me, in many ways, that's a call, an even greater call for women to mentor women and bring them up and support them and moving forward. I'm not saying men shouldn't do it. I am saying that too, but I really want to see women support women much better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And that dynamic where you have good men being worried about it is definitely should be delivered right to the bad men. Yeah.
And
they're making good men feel, more insecure, which is just horrible.
What's the best, as we're moving towards the end of the show, I want to ask you, what's the best piece of counterintuitive advice you ever got? Or for that matter, would give?
Counterintuitive.
Yeah, so, it's like everybody says you should do X, but you got the direction of don't do Y, or you even give the direction of do Y.
Wow. I don't know, my clients will probably tell you that. So much advice.
Maybe that's the question for you to ask your clients.
The counterintuitive advice that I give people a lot of times is when you're planning for the future and you are creating a long-range strategic plan, you're not going to understand how all of it is going to come to bear, and it's a bet. And if you try to look at metrics to indicate that you've made the right bet, particularly in the first couple of years, you won't see it. Very rarely do things get hit out of the ballpark. And you just have to have faith. You have to have faith in your planning, in your thinking, in your people. You need to be flexible and responsive, but sometimes it takes time. And as an entrepreneur now celebrating my 20th year, I mean, that's what I had to do. I mean, that's what you've had to do. I mean, sometimes you just have to have faith and keep working. There's no mystery to success. There's great people, good processes that help you figure out what to do better, and then a lot of hard work. And you got to have faith in it. And it's, I think the part that we do that's different, that helps our clients, is we allow a lot of people to be involved in the thinking process so that a lot of great creativity gets unleashed.
You said something there that I think is a fascinating piece for people to grab onto, which is the counterintuitive piece, which is these contradictory messages in the traditional sense of that we think of strategic thinking over here, and we think of faith as very much over there, that those two things would not seem to go into the same box at all, right? So strategy is like, well, what's our strategy? Over here is you got to have faith. Is like, hold on a second, we got strategy or faith? Because those two things don't seem to come together. What would you say to that?
They're the same thing. When we do strategic planning, we never do it based on just data. I mean,
right.
It's all about the heart. It's all about what people believe and what they really want to do. If you get heart, you'll get their minds and their legs and their hands. So, if you're spending your time working every day in an organization or building your company, it's all about what you care most about. And if we can create a strategic plan that you believe is going to achieve goals and has like a sense of purpose that you're committed to, which is where the heart comes from, then you'll do it and you'll feel great about it. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't really want people to just go to work to punch. I don't want somebody to work in a company for 20 years and not know what the difference between knit and woven is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I want them to know and say, I like knits better than woven, and here's where I think the company should go, and I'm going to study woven so I can understand them. I want that. And to do that, you have to get people to kind of give over a little bit. You have to get past the structure. You have to get to the heart, and you got to really get kind of commitment.
But I actually love that you tied those two things together so people can grasp the strategic and faith and belief and love of, and not separate from. They're actually one feeds the other if you do it right, and that's really important. Yeah. Cecilia, as we draw to the end, tell us, what brings you joy?
Oh my God, what brings me joy? I live in San Francisco. It is the most beautiful place in the world. So what brings me joy is being outside in nature with my dog, because that's when my brain gets released, and then that's where I do my best strategic thinking.
I get it.
Yeah.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Turner Classic Movies.
Oh, really?
Oh, I'm a huge classic movie fan.
Any sort of ones that stand out?
My favorite movie is The Best Years of Our Life.
Who is that? Tell me.
It's a movie about post-World War II, and it's about 3 soldiers coming home.
Oh, wow.
As timely today as it was when it was done in 1948, 1952, I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to see it.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of the show, I would like to ask you to share with our viewers, with our listeners, a piece of practical advice, something they can go away and do, preferably in the next 24 hours, but certainly the next working week. If there was one thing you could get them to do so that what we've talked about here would really hit home, what would it be?
So if you're working in an organization and you think you're a hidden strategist, make an appointment to talk to somebody about some of the ideas that you have. And if you're in a leadership role, make an appointment to talk to that person you know is the strategist that you just haven't engaged, because you know who they are.
That's really good. That's really good, simple advice. This has been fabulous. Really enjoyed our conversation. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources that you have.
Sure. The name of my company is Focused Momentum, FOCUSED, Momentum. And you can go to focusmomentum.com, and we have lots of tools there and resources, and you can get any of our resources or reach out and contact me.
Fabulous. And of course, we will post that in the show notes and make sure that everybody gets to know about that. This has been a real joy. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all of your investment. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And I want to remind you, dear listener, as always, that information is worth the hole in the donut. It's the application of the information that makes the change. It's important for you to listen back, play it back, take some notes, and then look at how can you put this in action, because that's what will change everything. Remember, you can chat about this show or any past episodes inside of our Facebook group on Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. Just go and have a look there. And remember, the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the challenge that they often spend a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, but they also have them leaving at an alarming rate. If you're sick and tired of investing in the training and development of your talent, only have them leave before you get your ROI, and come talk to us at Full fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and to keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need the triple W, just matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. You get it absolutely free. Find out where your real strengths are in leadership. And to find out more about hiring me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or strategist inside of your organization, you can simply go to fullmontyleadership.com. You can go /consulting or speaking as you choose. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the hidden strategists inside of your organization. Maybe you are one, and maybe you know one. Invite them in and grow your company. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit inside your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.